Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing the other episode, so this will be part 2 of our Arid Animal Pack animal review. Bit of a mouthful. We take a look at the rest of the animals that are come in this Arid Animal Pack. Really excited to get stuck in this one. So I know you guys have been waiting for this one for a little while, so I'll probably just get right into it. But we're going to be starting off with the rest of the animals. So we have got the sand cats. So let's have a look at these wonderful guys here. See if we can find one that's not going to go in the burrow. So, the sand cat. So, these guys are a species of small wild cat that come from and live in sandy and stony deserts, which is really cool. So, in terms of who it's related to, these guys are a member of the genus Felis. Their scientific name is Felis marigata, I believe. And they have believed to split on or split off from early felid about 4 to 2 million years ago. So in the Pliocene or into the early Pliocene, that's where they estimate to split off. So this is kind of after things like the jungle cat and the black-footed cat, but before things such as the African wild cat and the domestic cat and the Chinese mountain cat, for example. So in terms of characteristics, you can see they get kind of the name the sand cat because they like living in sand, but you can also see they've got a very sandy pale color to them, and that covers a lot of the top of their body, and their under half or underbody is much lighter, with a faint reddish line that runs from the outer corner of their eyes, as you can see there. It probably helps with looking. There is some variation between individuals, but they are not really spotted and all striped, but you can see there's some like dark bands on their limbs and things like that. Very interesting. They also have these large kind of greenish eyes as well. Greenish yellow eyes with ringed with white, as you can kind of see there. Really interesting look to them. And they've also got long whiskers that get to about 8 centimeters long, and they've got large outer ears, quite similar to domestic cat, which they have quite good hearing, as most cats do. So in Central Asia, where one of these places where they live, their winter coat can actually go quite long and thick, and it reaches about 51 millimeters, or about 2 inches in length. They're also, like other types of cats, they've got large paws with retractable claws with quite sharp as well, which is quite interesting. And the forelimbs are very sharp, but the ones on the hind feet are a little bit more blunt. The underside of their paws is actually protected by the searing sand that they walk on by hairs as well, so that's quite interesting, with these hairs growing between their toes that cushion their foot pads so they don't get burnt. Sandcats also quite well characterized, or you can tell the difference as well. They have a large, flat, white head, and they have relatively short legs and a relatively long tail. And the tail gets about 23 to 31 centimeters long, or about 9 to 12 inches. And they typically stand at about 24 to 36 centimeters, or 9 to 14 inches at the shoulder, and weigh between 1.5 to 3.4 kilograms, or 3 to 7 pounds, with the head to body length ranging between 39 to 52 centimeters, or about 15 to 20 inches. And they have these large 5 to 7 centimeter, or 2 to 2.8 inch ears that kind of broad out and give them their like broad head appearance. So in terms of distribution habitat, these guys like to live in sandy or stony deserts, and they have quite a wide distribution. They can be found from the deserts of North Africa, like the Sahara, but found into the southwest of like Pakistan, and then even into like Central Asia, which is quite interesting. They've been sighted and photographed in a lot of places, like in the Western Sahara, and they're very hard to spot, but there've been sightings all over the place. They live around the Arabian Peninsula, as well as southern Israel, and into Pakistan and southern Asia. So they're quite a wide range, and because of that wide range and potentially quite big population, they are considered least concern, which is a good thing. But in terms of their behavior and ecology, they are typically solitary, but except during the mating season or when females have kittens, of course, they make low, high-pitched and short rasping sounds, especially when they're seeking for a mate. And those vocalizations can be quite similar to that of a domestic cat. And it communicates using urine spraying and using scent marks and scratch marks as well. And it buries its feces in the sand and covers them. They have quite a interesting way of moving as well, that they move their belly close to the ground, and they move with a fast run that's punctuated often by occasional leaps. They are quite capable of sudden bursts of speed and can sprint up to about 30 to 40 kilometers an hour, or 19 to 25 miles per hour. And four radio-collared sandcats in Israel actually have been seen to move 5 to 10 kilometers or 3 to 6 miles in a single night. And they are generally active at night, hunting and traveling an average of about 5 or so. Ooh, we've got another one coming over here. Let's see if we can have a look at you. Quite cute. Anyway, these guys move throughout the night, average about 5 kilometers or about 3 miles. They retreated below ground and stayed in a burrow during the day, and during a survey period, they use several burrows within their home range. These burrows are typically about 1.5 meters or about 5 feet deep, and dug in slightly slanting ground and using only one single entrance, though burrows can have 2 to 3 entrances. These burrows are either typically abandoned by porcupines or foxes, or dug by gerbils and other rodents. And in winter, the sandcat can actually stay in the sun during the day, but during the hot season, they are nocturnal and crepuscular. So they either come out at night or during the dawn and dusk. In terms of their hunting and diet, these guys have been observed mostly feeding on young rodents or small rodents, or also the young of Cape hares, desert monitors, desert horned vipers as well. So they're pretty much sandfish as well. So basically small rodents, small reptiles, and small birds as well. And if they catch more than they eat, they'll often bury their remains so they can come back and grab it later, which is quite interesting. In Israel, they've been known to eat like agamas, uromastyx as well, or spiny-tailed lizard, uromastyx. They've been found near their burrows, also spiny mice, larks, other small reptiles, and jaboas and gerbils, as is considered the most frequent prey. But yeah, pretty much eat anything that's small enough. In terms of their reproduction of life cycle, and while we do have a look at that, we can see these cute little kittens. Look at this little cutie. Definitely a big fan of this little guy. So, in terms of their reproduction and life cycle, estrus in females typically last for 5 to 6 days. And frequently they call and scent mark to kind of show, hey, I'm an estrus, come mate with me. And after they've obviously mated with another male sandcat, they have a gestation period of about 59 to 66 days and give birth to a litter of between 2 to 3 kittens. These kittens weigh about 39 to 80 grams or 1.4 to 2.8 ounces at birth, and they have pale yellow or reddish fur, and they grow quite rapidly. They reach 3/4 of adult size within 5 months. And they are fully independent by the end of their first year and reach sexual maturity soon after their first year. And in some areas, they can even have kind of 2 litters per year if there's obviously enough resources to have them. And in terms of kept globally, about 228 sandcats are born globally in zoos by 2007. Only 60% live to day 30. They typically died because of maternal neglect for first-time mothers, but they can live up to 13 years of captivity, which is quite similar to, of course, domestic cats. And the life expectancy for wild ones is not really known. But as I mentioned, they are least concerned, but they do face threats. So habitat degradation and loss of sand dunes has been a major problem for sandcats in Western Asia. And also people have been prosecuting them because they think they're predators and things like that. Also in the Sahara, there have been often traps laid out by jackals and foxes. They get killed on those for killing poultry as well. So people like to get them as well. Also, there's issues such as the pet trade. People have been trying to keep sandcats, but they do not make very good pets. Just because they look like a domestic cat, they haven't been bred for thousands of years to be good pets, so they're not very good pets. And there've also been risks of domestic and feral cats transmitting diseases to these guys, such as feline leukemia virus is another big issue for these guys. But they are considered least concern as a large population, things like that. And there are some in captivity. There's actually in 2010 there were 2 sandcat kittens born in the LA Zoo, which were first bred by in vitro fertilization and transferred the frozen thawed embryos into the oviducts of the ovulating female. So they were born by in vitro fertilization, which is a first and really, really cool. And really, really cool little cat. I do love these little cuties. So really nice cat. Nice to see a little cat, because we've got so many big cats on Planet Zoo. Nice to see a little cat. So let's go on and look at the Zoopedia for these guys. So sandcat, Felis mangata, wild population unknown, small wild cat from North Africa, Middle East, and Central Asia. You can see quite a wide range, but also quite disjointed. So they're not often spotted, so probably there is a lot that lives between them. You just kind of don't see it, but you can see a lot of population right into Central Asia. Really, really cool. So population size, like modern cats, not modern cats, domestic cats, they're typically solitary, male and female per group, but a female bachelor group can have up to 3. Dominance, not really much dominance hierarchy. They are promiscuous and typically solitary. All mature offspring become outsiders. Relationship with humans, they're quite shy, and guests cannot enter their habitat. Size as well, about 30 centimeters tall at the shoulder. For both, live about 16 years, and males are slightly bigger. They're 2.75 kilograms, females are 2.25 kilograms. So age of sexual maturity is about a year, and the age of sexual sterility is about 10 years. Number of offspring is 2 to 4 babies per mating event. Gestation period is about 2 months, which is about right. Interbirth period is about 12 months, and they're easy to reproduce in captivity. So fun facts. A litter of sand kittens can have multiple fathers if a mother mated with multiple males while in estrus. That's true for pretty much all cats. Sand cats have thick hair that grows between their toes to protect their paw pads from the hot sand. That is true. Sand cats are notoriously difficult to track because their lighter steps do not actually leave footprints on the sand. So that's part of the reason why they have such a disjointed population, because it's quite hard to find them. Another cool thing is sand cats do not need to drink for weeks at a time because they get all the moisture they need from their prey. A lot of desert animals kind of have those kind of adaptations, which is because water's quite rare in the desert, obviously. They also have incredible hearing, even for a cat. The auditory bulb, or the bony air structures in the skull, is actually much larger than those of domestic cats and big cats. And that's probably because how sand moves, you can often hear things in the sand that allows them to better catch prey. So it's a good adaptation for living in deserts. And in terms of habitats, they don't like sharing with anyone. But yeah, another really cute little kitty. Definitely a big fan. So next up, we're moving on to some ungulates. I know everyone loves some good ungulates, but this time we have got the Dama Gazelle. So let's have a look at you. Well, that's not what we want. Let's have a look at you, as you'll actually work for me this time. Look at this wonderful guy. So the Dama Gazelle, also known as the Manor Gazelle or the Arid Gazelle, these guys are a species of gazelle that live in the Sahara Desert and the Sahel. So these guys, as you can see, they're typically a white color with a reddish-brown head and neck. Both sexes are typically have these like ring horns that kind of come up like an S, and the males is about 35 centimeters or about 14 inches long, with females having ones that are quite a bit shorter. You can see they've got a small head with a narrow muzzle with large eyes, and they have quite a long neck and longer legs compared to most gazelles. They typically reach between 90 to 95 centimeters, or about 35 to 37 inches tall at the shoulder, and weigh between 35 to 75 kilograms, or about 77 to 165 pounds, and typically live for about 12 years in the wild and about 18 in captivity. And yeah, really, really cool. In terms of like the babies, though, let's have a look at the little babies while we get a chance. So typically, the babies, after a few days of giving birth, these guys are young, and these young baby deer, or not baby deer, baby antelope, are able to run around and follow the herd. And after a week, they're able to run as fast as the adults, so they get pretty much go quite fast. The Dama Gazelle is also considered the largest species of gazelle, not antelope, gazelle, and has incredibly long legs, which allows them to dissipate body heat. And it's one of the many ways they can stay cool in the hot desert environment that they live in. And they also tend to need water more than like other relatives that live in deserts. And they actually can withstand fairly long periods of drought, though. But unlike many other desert mammals, these guys are diurnal species, so they typically come out during the day. And always alert, they also use a behavior called pronking to warn herd members of danger. And pronking involves the animal hopping up and down on all four of its legs stiff, and so the limbs touch the ground at the same time. And males will establish territories, very similar to other types of antelopes. And during the breeding season, they will try to exclude other mature males from their territory. And they'll mark these territories using dung piles and urine and secretions from glands near their eyes. So there is a couple of subspecies of Dama Gazelle. I don't know what species they've probably used here, but this one looks like, I believe, the Arid Gazelle, which is quite rare in captivity, but they're kind of considered subspecies, but they're actually most likely just phenotypes, because there's kind of a cline for them, so most likely they're just different color patterns, very similar to like plain zebras. They're often considered different subspecies, but they actually seem to just represent different colors as you kind of go through their range to better reflect heat and also to get rid of insects. So it's most likely just like a phenotype, or just how moves as you move through the altitudes and like latitudes and things like that. But there is a couple. There's the Manor Gazelle and the um, nominates, which is Dama Gazelle, Naga Dama. But sadly, this is a species that is critically endangered, but is actually a really cool conservation story. These guys have been hunted a lot by people. Also, habitat destruction has been a big issue as humans will cut down the trees that these guys feed on. Human threats, they've been hunting them using vehicles to kind of kill them and chase them and kill them. Also, civil unrest, like places like Sudan, has affected these gazelles. They already have a hard time surviving, but things as well. Also, tourism is another threat they face because tourists want to take pictures with the species, and in doing so, they get perceived as a threat and kind of stresses out the gazelles because they die from heat stress and things like that. But luckily, they are an animal that is, even though they're critically endangered, there's lots of conservation efforts going to take care of these guys. There's been lots of reserves set up to have populations of gazelles for captive breeding. It's a very popular way to help the species. Lots of zoos, such as the European zoos, North American zoos, also private game people have been managing stud books or different populations so that people can maintain their genetics. And even though the small population size has been a concern, there's been lots of efforts to try and release them into the wild, some reintroduction projects to bring the species back into the wild. But they're are doing okay in that regard. They're very rare in the wild. There is some in situ conservation, but it's mainly like captive breeding, and there are introductions in the works. But yeah, they're down, but they're not out. Hopefully, because of all the conservation efforts and the breeding and stuff in captivity, these guys will do much better in the next like few years. So that's really, really cool. So let's have a look at the Zoopedia for the Dama Gazelle. So the wild population, it says here, is about 100 to 200, but there's probably about 1,000 or so, or even more in captivity, since they're doing quite well in captivity. Let's have a look at their range. You can see how big their range is. So the westernmost, I believe, range is the Rufellus Gazelle. So this one's kind of you can see the climb going on, so you can see different colors as they get down. So this one's, I believe, the Manor Gazelle is found in North Africa, so this is the Manor Gazelle, and the nominate subspecies, the Dama Gazelle, I believe, is about here, and these ones are west. Dama is kind of like the western one, I believe. Don't quote me on that though, but I think it's really cool to talk about different like patterns and how their color changes as you move through like latitudes and things like that. It's really, really cool. Next up, species data. 3 to 20, so you need to have a minimum of 3, but you can have up to 20 with 1 male and 19 females. Like most other antelopes, they don't like having more than 1 male. But bachelor groups can be between 3 to 20. The dominance is a male. Dominant male leads the herd with a female hierarchy within the herd. They are polygamous. And mature maturation rules is that mature males will be related to the alpha will become outsiders. They're quite shy with humans, and I'm not sure why, but people can go in their habitats. Not sure about that. I don't know why they did that with this guy, but not the dromedary. But I feel like it's kind of one of those things. Happens in Planet Zoo sometimes. You can go in with a anteater, which is known to kill people, but you can't go in with a llama. So it kind of just keeps the trend, I guess. In terms of sizes, about 1 meter tall at the shoulder, as I mentioned, about 15 years life expectancy. So that's kind of in between 18 in captivity and 12 in the wild. And in terms of weight, you can see males are quite a bit bigger, about 55 kilograms for a male and 37.5 for a female. Age of sexual maturity is about 1.5 years, and age of sexual sterility is when they die. They have 1 baby per mating event. They have a gestation incubation period about 6 months, an interbirth period of 12 months, and quite easy to breed in captivity. Some fun facts about these guys. In Chad, the Dama Gazelle is symbol for beauty and elegance. The Dama Gazelle also makes a honking sound when alarmed. Much of the conservation information for the Dama Gazelle has been provided by pastoralists and desert nomads. Another really, really cool thing. They're also the rarest gazelle in the world, with less than 400 in the wild. And the Dama Gazelle has been going through small-scale reintroduction schemes since 2015, which are believed to be its best chance of avoiding extinction, which is quite interesting. And they like to share their habitats with scimitar aurochs, and actually quite a similar story, the scimitar aurochs being hunted into near extinction but coming back, and also the Addax as well, and the Dromedary Camel, another really, really cool animal. Let's see if we can have a look at the male before we go. This female. Where's the male at? There he is. He's having a sleep. But yeah, really, really nice. You can see the big horns on the male there. and compared to the females, really, really pretty. So, yep, that's the Dama Gazelle. Next up, we have our second to last animal. Really, really excited to talk about this one. Another critically endangered ungulate. We all love those, but we've got here the Somali Wild Ass. So, the Somali Wild Ass, also known as the African Wild Donkey, these guys are a member of the equids, so they're type of horse. These guys typically stand at about 1.2 meters or about 4 foot tall and weigh approximately 600 pounds or about 250 kilograms. You can see they've got quite a smooth coat and light grey with a fawn colour, and it generally fades to white on their underbelly, and they've got some stripes on their undersides. And all subspecies, this is the Somali wild ass, but there's also the Nubian wild ass. The main difference is Somali wild ass has a horizontal stripe going down their back as well. You can see there that almost resembles those of a zebra and down kind of their legs there. So that's the Somali wild ass. The Nubian wild ass has a stripe across the shoulder and almost looks like a donkey because I believe they're probably more closely related. But you can also see they've got that stiff mane going on there with these large black ears with black margins and quite slender long legs and slender hooves and all that. So in terms of how they're related, these guys believe the most recent common ancestor of all the equids evolved probably about 5.6 or about maximum about 7 million years ago, or between 7 and 3 million years ago. So basically kind of like the Miocene, the Pliocene. I mean the Miocene, yeah. But the first kind of Asian homines, or like the kind of these guys as the asses, these guys probably split during the Pliocene or Pleistocene, so about between 3 to 2 million years ago. But yeah, really, really cool animals. In terms of the taxonomy, there's kind of been considered one species, and then it's kind of considered two now. There's the Nubian wild ass, which is found in the Nubia, it's like northeastern Sudan, around the Nile River, and the Somali wild ass that lives in Ethiopia and Somaliland. So a little bit different populations. But in terms of habitats, these guys are well suited to living in deserts or semi-arid habitats. And they have a tough digestive system that can break pretty much down any desert vegetation that they can find. And they're quite good at extracting moisture, which is quite important for pretty much all desert animals. And they actually can go without water for a fairly long time in comparison to a lot of other animals, which is quite cool. They also have large ears that give them an excellent sense of hearing, and also that can be used to keep them cool. And because of the sparse vegetation, wild asses typically live separated from each other, except for mothers and young, unlike the tight-knit herds of wild horses. And they have quite loud voices, and these voices can be heard over 3 kilometers, which helps them keep in contact with other asses, which is quite interesting. So in terms of behavior, these guys are primarily active during cooler parts of the day, so like the early morning and late afternoon, and they seek shade and shelter during the day or on rocky hills, things like that. They're also quite agile and quite nimble animals. They can move quickly across boulders and mountains and like move on the flat when they're running on flat ground, they can run up to about 70 kilometers an hour, about 53 miles per hour. In keeping with these feats, they have particularly hard hooves, and their hooves can grow quite quickly, which is quite cool. Males will typically maintain a large territory, about 23 square kilometers, and they mark them with dung heaps, which is an essential marker for these guys. And due to these size of these ranges, a dominant male cannot actually exclude other males. So rather, intruders are tolerated and treated as subordinates, and they're kept as far as possible from any resident females. And in the presence of an estrus female, the males will bray quite loudly, and they live in loose herds of up to 50 individuals. So we'll have a look at the cute little foals as we talk about their gestation and all that. So in the wild, African wild asses typically breed during the wet season, and their gestation period lasts between 11 to 12 months. And the one foal is born during the period of October to February, with the foal weaning about 6 to 8 months after birth, and then reaching sexual maturity at about an age of about 2 years. And they have a lifespan of up to 40 years of captivity. Also quite swift runners, as I talked about, almost as fast as a horse, and they actually do not tend to flee if they get attacked. They will instead defend by kicking and biting each other, or biting the threat, which is quite interesting. And in terms of these guys' diet, The African wild ass usually typically eats things like grasses, bark, and leaves, and despite being primarily adapted for living in an arid climate, they do depend on water. And when they have not received the needed moisture from their vegetation, they must drink at least once every 3 days. However, they can survive on a small amount of liquid and actually have been reported drinking salty or brackish water. So, as the species itself, or like relatives, because of domestic donkeys and things like that, they're not in threat of extinction. The wild ancestors of these guys, obviously the two subspecies of wild African wild ass, are considered critically endangered. They often were captured for domestication, and this has led to inbreeding with domestic and wild populations. Also, there's been habitat degradation, and they're hunted for food and traditional medicines. Competition with livestock has been a big issue, and this has led the wild populations being only about a few hundred individuals, with, I believe, the Somali wild ass only about 150 or 200 or so in the wild, and this has made their populations critically endangered. But there is about 150 or so wild Somali wild asses, not wild, zoos, Somali wild asses in zoos across the globe, and they've been breeding programs and managing them and coordinating them, and hopefully this could help to reintroduce them into the wild. So yeah, really, really cool. I really do love this. Let's see if they interact with each other. No, I think they're just gonna stand in each other. So let's have a look at the Zoopedia. The Somali wild ass between 2200 and wild. Really, really nice image. So you can see this is the Somali one. So the Somali one kind of lives around here in Somaliland and Sudan. And the Nubian lives a little bit higher up here. So a little bit around here, you'd find the Nubian subspecies. In terms of species data, they live in herds of up to 1 to 7, up to 3 males, up to 5 females. And they kind of live in these loose herds, things like that. Male bachelor groups can be 1 to 3 and females 1 to 7. With the dominant male defending his harem. They are polygamous and they are gregarious, so all mature offspring are kind of tolerated by the group. They are confident with humans, but no, their guests can't enter their habitat. Typically, their size about 1.3 meters at the shoulder. Should be about 1.2, but splitting hairs. They live for about 33 years on average, up to 40 years of captivity. Weight is about 275 kilograms, so yeah, about 600 pounds. And age of sexual maturity is about 2 years, which fits. They can have babies till they die. They have one foal per mating event, and they gestate for about 12 months, and they have an interbirth period of about 12 months, with an average kind of reproduction rate in captivity. So have a look. So Somali wild asses are adapted to extremely hot environments and can eat very tough desert plants, which is true. The call of the Somali wild ass can be heard up to 2 miles away. Also true. The large ears of the Somali wild ass allow it to cool down during hot days. And unlike horse species, which run when frightened, asses will refuse to move and freeze when intimidated. And it's also believed that domestic donkeys found in Italy are descendants from the Somali wild ass. Also potentially true. But yeah, really, really cool. And what animals I like to live with? I like to live with the Addax, the common ostrich, and the Dromedary Camel. So some of the more animals that they can live with. So, we've done all those. We've got one last animal that I know everyone's excited to have a look at. This is an animal that everyone's been asking for a while. But we have got here the black rhinoceros. Another really, really cool animal. A really, really awesome model as well. Definitely fallen in love with this one. So this is black rhino, also known as the hooked lip rhino. These guys are a species of rhino native to eastern and southern Africa and can be found in like Angola, Botswana, Malawi, Mozambique, South Africa, Eswatini, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, places like that. So these guys kind of evolved. The rhinoceros originated during the Eocene, and this direct ancestor of the black rhino, or Dicrus and Paracelsus, was present in the Pliocene, so about 5 million years ago. So yeah, between 4 to 5 million years ago, the black rhino and white rhino split, and kind of the black rhino itself evolved during the early Pliocene, or late Pliocene, I mean. So in terms of its size, an adult black rhinoceros can get to about 140 to 180 centimeters tall, or about 55 to 71 inches at the shoulder, and between 3 to 3.75 or 9.8 to 12.3 feet in length, with an adult typically weighing between 800 and 1400 kilograms, or between 1,700 or 3,000 pounds. However, some unusually large males have got up to about 2,896 kilograms, or about 6,385 pounds. With cows typically being smaller than bulls, and they all have two horns on their head there, made of keratin, which is the same stuff your fingernails are made of, with the larger one being up to about 50 centimeters on average, but exceptional rhinos have got up to about 140 centimeters, or about 55 inches. The longest known black rhino horn measured about 1.5 meters, or about 4.9 feet, and sometimes even a third smaller horn can develop. Typically these horns are developed for defense, intimidation, and for digging up roots and breaking branches during feeding, since these guys are browsers. The black rhino is smaller than the white rhino and closer to size to the Javan rhino. So they're smaller than the Indian and the white rhino, but bigger than the Sumatran and Javan rhino. They're pretty much in the middle. They have a pointed and prehensile lip. I'll kind of move to one over here since you're kind of moving off to the corner there. They have a prehensile lip, as you can kind of see there. And this is one of the ways you can tell a black and white rhino apart. The black rhino has kind of a pointed lip, and the white rhino has quite a wide lip. And this is adapted for feeding on leaves and twigs, so they're much more adapted to browsing rather than white rhinos, which are adapted to grazing. Let's have a look at this one over here then. So these guys are much more adapted to browsing than grazing, which is the white rhino's kind of MO. And the black rhino can be distinguished as well from the white rhinoceros as by its smaller size, smaller skull, smaller ears, and also the position of the head, which is typically held quite a bit higher than the white rhino since they're browsers. And also, typically, like other rhinos, they also have this quite thick skin. It protects from thorns and sharp grasses, and their skin also harbor parasites like mites and ticks, which are picked off by oxpeckers, which is sometimes described to be a mutualism relationship, but actually they will drink the oxpeckers will drink the blood of the rhino, so often that can actually mean they're actually hurting the rhino. And it's also been quite commonly assumed that black rhinos rely much more on hearing and smell. However, some studies actually show that their eyesight's actually quite good and is actually comparable to that of a rabbit. They also have ears that are quite good at detecting sounds from wide range and have an excellent sense of smell that alert them to the presence of predators. So in terms of their distribution, as I mentioned, these guys were now found around southern and eastern Africa, but prehistorically, they have been found in places like the Sahara and the Eastern Desert. But historically, they've been now found in southern eastern Africa, though they did not occur in the Congo Basin. They get pretty much found from South Africa into the Namibia Desert, right around Tanzania, Kenya, and up into like eastern Africa, such as the Ethiopian highlands and things like that. And they have gone extinct in some of these areas, but they have been reintroduced. They were introduced into Botswana. They went extinct in Botswana in 1992, and then were reintroduced in 2003. So there have been some conservation efforts around these guys. In terms of behavior, these guys were generally thought to be solitary. With only a strong bond being between a mother and her calf. Bulls and cows typically have a consort relationship between mating, though they will actually have loose relationships with other individuals. They're not very territorial and will share their territory with other rhinos. Their home ranges depend a lot depending on the season and the availability of food and water, and vice versa. So they'll have a small range when there's lots of water and lots of food, and a large range where there's not as much water or food than normal. So it depends kind of how they move around. Typically, sex and age of a rhino will actually also impact their range. So typically, cows will have larger range than those of bulls, especially when they have a calf. And in the Serengeti, they have ranges between 70 to 100 square kilometers, or about 27 to 39 square miles. And places such as the Ngorongoro, these guys can have between 2.6 to 5.8 kilometers, or 58 kilometers, or about 1 to 2 square miles. It depends. It just depends on where you are and what availability of food there is for the rhino. Typically in captivity, these guys have, in captivity and reservations, the sleep patterns show that the males will sleep longer on average than females, and other factors is that they'll roll as they'll kind of when they decide to sleep. Or they do not sleep any longer activity, they will actually sleep in different locations in captivity, which is quite interesting. They also have a reputation for being quite aggressive, and they will charge readily at a perceived threat. They've even been observed charging tree chunks and termite mounds. And black rhinos will fight each other, and they actually have the highest rates of mortal combat recorded in any mammal. So about 50% of males and 30% of females will die from fight-related injuries. And although they do not normally have predators, thanks to the large size and big horns, adult black rhinos have been fallen prey to rhinos in exceptional circumstances, and young babies and even subadults have been caught by lions and things like that. Also, black rhinos will follow the same trails as elephants to find water, and they also use smaller trails when they're browsing. And when it's all, whilst they're all assumed to be short-sighted, they have better eyesight than often perceived and often thought. In terms of diet, these guys are browsers, so they'll feed on leafy plants, twigs, shoots, and thorny wood bushes and small trees, and they will sometimes eat grass, depending where they are. It depends on their habitat, and we have been seen that these guys will kind of be inactive during the hottest part of the day, like a lot of animals, and kind of will feed either in the late afternoon and early morning, or even at night. So typically will avoid coming out. And they also seem to change their diet. They will eat different things when there's elephants around, so they can often compete with elephants for food, which is quite interesting. In terms of communication, though, these guys use several forms of communication. They'll use, because they're solitary, they will use scent marking as a way that they'll kind of communicate with each other. They'll urinate on on trees and on bushes and around water holes. They'll even defecate as well to kind of show around feeding stations, things like that. They'll also smell. They also create like lots of different sounds and things like that. And they use these scents as well to kind of identify the age and sex and identity of different rhinos, which is quite interesting. And in terms of reproduction, let's talk about reproduction, because these little rhinos are so cute. Look at the little baby boy. So reproduction, adults are typically solitary, and they really only come together to mate, and they do not have a seasonal pattern, though births tend to be happen towards the end of the raining season and in more arid environments. When they're in season, the cows will mark dung piles, and the bulls will follow them until they find her, and then she'll mate. And typically the gestation period for a black rhino is about 15 months, and a single calf will be born that's weighed about 35 to 50 kilograms, or about 80 to 110 pounds, and can follow its mother just after 3 days. And weaning will take about 2 years, and the mother and calf will stay together for 2 to 3 years until her next calf is born, though female calves may actually stay longer and they may form smaller groups. The young are occasionally taken by lions and hyenas, but most often they will be surviving to adulthood. And sexual maturity will typically reach about 5 to 7 years of age for females and 7 to 8 for males. And the life expectancy for natural conditions without pressures from poaching is about 35 to 50 years. So it can live quite a long time. So let's talk about the sordid conservation history of this poor critically endangered rhinoceros. So for the most part of the 20th century, they were the most numerous rhino in all of Africa, which of all rhino species, and is believed to be several 100,000 living in Africa. But during the later half of the 20th century, the numbers were reduced to 70,000 and their lowest point was about the early 1990s, where their population was only like 2,500, and its lowest point in 2004, there was only 2,410 rhinos living in Africa. But luckily, due to some conservation efforts and reintroductions, things like that, the population now has gone up to about 5,000 or 500. So even though they're a critically endangered species and have declined a lot, they are on the up and up, which is quite good. There have been reintroductions to rhinos all across their range, and one of the main threats to these guys is hunting, because hunting and poaching for their horns. Also, habitat degradation is another big thing for these guys as well. But luckily, it's illegal, and there's lots of people. They are protected legally. There's lots of people trying to protect these rhinos, like anti-poaching groups and things like that. So they are actually increasing, and because of reintroductions, things like that, they are doing well. So they're a great conservation story. But as I mentioned, the threats can be habitat changes, competing species. They do compete with elephants in some areas, but mainly it's illegal poaching and habitat changes. But luckily there are areas being protected and things like that, and anti-poaching groups and things like that. So they are a species on the up and up. They are increasing, which is a great conservation story. It shows that our efforts to protect certain species are really paying off. And who does not love a good conservation story? The return of the black rhino. Because I love black rhinos. I think they're a really, really cool animal. I haven't had the fortune to seeing a black rhino, but they're pretty much a blacklist. Not a blacklist. A wish list, or a kind of... I forgot the name of it. wish list stuff. Whatever. um, but anyway, let's have a look at the Zoopedia. I was trying to think what I was thinking about, like, what do you call it? Bucket list, that's what it is, bucket list. But anyway, let's have a look. The wild population is about 3,150. I think that's outdated. I believe the population is actually around 5,000 or 6,000 now, considering it's about 2009. But still critically endangered, sadly. You can see they've got quite a wide range. This is their range now. They probably lived a little bit more north, but they've gone extinct in those part of the range. And prehistorically, they would have lived up to, like, the sub-Sahara, like around here, like that. So their range has changed a lot over history, but we can see they've been reintroduced in some of these areas, and they are, I believe, being reintroduced to more modern areas, such as like Ethiopia, things like that. Yeah, really, really interesting. In terms of groups, about 1 to 3, so 1 male up to 2 females. So they are more solitary than like white rhinos. White rhinos will live in small herds. These guys are much more solitary. They do not have a dominance hierarchy, and they're also polygamous. They're also gregarious, so all male offspring will be all mature offspring will be tolerated by the outsider. They are quite confident, and no, guests cannot enter the habitat of a black rhino, which is a good thing. On average, they're about 1.6 meters tall, but I mentioned tall at the shoulder, but they also get to 1.8, as I mentioned. Life expectancy is about 40 to 50 years. 40 is probably good average, and weight's about 1,100 kilograms, probably good average. As I mentioned, age of sexual maturity is about 7 years. That's typically for a female, but 7 to 8 years for a male. But yeah, that's a good average. They can have babies until they die. Number of offspring is typically 1. Their gestation period is about 15 months, and the interbirth period is about 30 months. And they're quite difficult to breed in captivity, simply being rhinos. But yeah, really, really cool. Let's have a look at some good facts. So black rhinos will growl and scream when they are scared or in conflict situations. They also have quote-unquote mutualistic relationships with birds such as oxpeckers and egrets that remove parasites from the skin, which is not true because, as I mentioned, oxpeckers will actually drink the blood of they'll get into like sores and stuff and drink the blood of the black rhinos, so it's not quite true. Black rhinos mainly feed on browse, as the leaves from shrubs, bushes, and trees, and they have tough, prehensile lips that are adapted for this kind of foraging. Of the 8 subspecies, I'm very skeptical about the subspecies thing about rhinos, but only 3 subspecies remain: the eastern black rhino, the south central black rhino, and the southwestern black rhino. With the 4 subspecies, the Uganda black rhino may actually survive in reserves outside of Uganda. But the most likely population declines. There doesn't seem to be too much actually differences between the different populations. But black rhinos, as I mentioned, can also be quite extremely aggressive, with 50% of males and 30% of female black rhinos dying from injuries related to have been because of fighting each other, which is quite cool. And let's see who they like to live with. They don't like to live with anyone because they are grumpy. But yeah, really, really cool. I just love this rhino. It's nice to get a black rhino. Very cool animal. I actually quite like this pack. My thoughts on this pack, I quite like it. I like that we got so much variation, and I know a lot of people that love ungulates will love it. We get a lot of animals that people have been asking for, like the Dromedary Camel and the Porcupine, and some really cool critically endangered antelopes and horses and things like that. And the black rhino. How can you not complain about black rhinos? Black rhinos are an animal that people have been wanting for a while, and I'm definitely a big fan. So, yeah, I think this would be a great place to end the video, so I really, really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified to a loading thing. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.